Hi guys, hope you're all well and getting some waves. This is the review of the Lost Puddle Jumper HP, and it's in the new C4 carbon cork technologies from Lost, and as in collaboration with, I believe, a guy called Drew Baggett in the States. So, board first, I guess. So the Lost Puddle Jumper HP is basically a high performance version of the standard Lost Puddle Jumper. So it's back to stretching it out a little bit longer, pulling the nose in a little bit, pulling the tail in a little bit, and refining the volume down a little bit. So yep, if you've already got a puddle jumper, this is basically a step up from that. Still keeps the same width, but it tucks in the tail a lot and in the nose, and it just adds a little bit of rocker to it as well. Definitely a little bit more late nose kick and probably a little bit of tail rocker, but not masses. And the tail is still fairly wide squash. It's still 16 in the tail. So this board is 6'2", still 22 wide and 2 3/4, bringing it in at, this one's actually 41 litres, but the stock one would be 42. And I'm not actually that sure this one's actually not 42 as well, because it still feels pretty good. Paddle's pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to post another review of the Puddle Fish compared with the Puddle Jumper, compared with the Puddle Jumper HP, because it's, you know, it's starting to get a bit crazy now. It's starting to get quite confusing. But rest assured, the Puddle Jumper series is an absolutely excellent series of boards, and all you need to do is choose the right one for you. And even if you chose the wrong one, you're still going to have a great board. So yeah, just look at my comparison on them. I did a comparison in the past of the Puddle Jumper and the Puddle Fish, and now I've compared all three of them. So depending on what you've got in your quiver, where you want the board to sit, how good you are, and what your local waves are like, you could pick something in the Puddle Jumper series or two in the Puddle Jumper series that would probably cover your range of waves from probably like knee to overhead. Okay, so carbon cork, this is interesting new technology. So this is the next generation of the C3s. The C3s are actually like a full carbon chassis, and then they actually had a cork layer underneath, but they left the cork exposed. And I thought that would probably be the case, but I think a lot of people probably had a bit of trouble getting their heads around that. It's probably a bit of a big change for them to actually have an exposed cork deck that you possibly didn't need to wax and possibly could wax. And the idea of, like, yeah, so basically they've left the cork in there, but they've put some more they put another layer of cloth over it and glassed it in, and then painted it afterwards. So these are actually made in Vietnam, and so are quite a lot of the carbon wraps. So they could be made locally, they could be made in the US, they could be made in Vietnam, but honestly, the quality of the ones out of Vietnam is absolutely first class. So I wouldn't worry about where if you see a made in Vietnam on it, it's that's Lost's own approved epoxy specialist in Vietnam, and they're excellently finished. And you know, I heard a podcast from Matt Bowles himself, and it's quite interesting because, like they were saying, you know, the extra processes that go into these, there would be just too much of an expensive board if they made them in the States. You know, they'd be looking at. I mean, they do make them in the States, but you know, they're not making the margin on them. So Vietnam allows them to have a bit of margin, because this is basically EPS blank. It's epoxy resin. It's got this layer of cork inside it, and then you've got the carbon strips front and back, which are not dissimilar to the carbon wrap. They just don't wrap round, basically. So the work that's gone into this, and it's super white because it's got an extra. It's basically been sprayed after. So you're gonna have a super white board. You've got an epoxy board. You've got these cool little windows through to the cork where they've left some visible, and you can see through into the cork here as well. Don't worry about the tech either, because basically the tech's really good. It's very similar to the carbon wrap. It's probably not quite as snappy, poppy and zingy and electric as the carbon wrap is, but it does have the very similar flex, and it's still very lively. And if anything, the cork actually damps damps chop and chatter a little bit more than the carbon wrap. So I don't think you can go too far wrong between them. I know on the man Noel Salas's review, he was sort of saying that they thought maybe the carbon wrap was better for a slightly more performance board, and the Cork's possibly better for the smaller wave boards, because the more junky conditions, the Cork's going to help you out with the chatter. But he said they both feel great, which I would agree with. Again, superbly finished board. So yeah, get into the board a little bit. So as you can see, we've got a little bit more rocker going on. You'll see that extra flip in the nose compared with what we had on just the normal puddle jumper. Still got that refinement in the tail, but it carries a little bit of meat there. I'll show you the concaves in a minute when I come round, but what you won't see is, when you see the outline pictures, you won't see that the rail's actually been dropped a bit more. So your rail sort of, instead of being full further out, it tapers off in the last bit. So basically this is all aimed at slightly better waves or slightly better surfers where you're not so concerned about catching the nose. Still a great paddler, it's still got plenty of meat in the tail, it's still fast board. So as I'm saying in the comparisons, if you're quite a good surfer, you might not even possibly want to, if you're quite a good surfer and you're in fairly zippy waves locally, you might go straight to this, and you might have something like the Puddle Fish, or possibly even like a beanbag underneath it. I've got a beanbag, and to me, beanbag's the only true groveler I've got out of them. I don't really consider the Puddle jumper or the Puddle Fish to be a groveler for me, because I'm riding bigger boards, I'm a bit older, I'm a bit heavier, and the waves are really flat faced where I am. So even the Puddle Fish, I'd probably start riding the Puddle Fish when it's like maybe 2 foot, maybe chest high, and I've ridden the Puddle Fish in like overhead waves. So like this would ride. I'd probably have to ride, again, probably start at chest to shoulder high, and then this is probably going to be fine in overhead as well. And then after that, I'll step up to my quiver killer. So yeah, this is a really good board. You can see the tech in there is really nice. We've got a nice squash tail, got 5 fin plugs, nice and sharp in that tail there. It gets a bit more refined out of the tail. The wide point's just been moved back a little bit. So it's really going to allow you to crack off harder turns in the more critical part of the wave than you'd be able to do on the normal puddle jumper. The concaves are quite similar. We've got the nice big single running through there. It dives into a double just around the fins, and then there's an awful lot of V off the tail, which I'll try and come around and show you. And hopefully from that backside you can see the rail profile as well, where the rail's actually been dropped a little bit off the other one. So yeah, these are good investment. They're a little bit more than the PU board, but you've got this carbon cork EPS. It's sprayed after, feels great. It's got lots of pop to it. It's feels quite durable. It's quite hard. It's obviously a very well quality controlled epoxy board. It's been, I guess it's been really well made. I'm guessing they've trained up the guys in Vietnam extremely good, because this is a highly finished board. It's like I think it's a worthy investment. If you wanted an epoxy for small waves, I think this is going to be a really good chatter damping, long lasting, good pop, nice flex, good feel, and it's going to give you everything you want, I reckon. So yeah, that's about that really. I can't think of much else. I've only ridden it a couple of times. We're not getting good waves at the minute big enough to take this out, but it's a good paddler. I was quite worried about it being 41, because I thought it was going to come in at 42, which I would have been happy with 42, but this is fine. If anything, it's just going to be a bit more, that little litre out is just going to make it a bit more performance. Yep, I'll come around and try and do some concave views. Hopefully we'll line up pretty good here. Oops, try not to ding it. So yeah, hopefully that's looking pretty good. So you can see like single, quite a deep single through there. And then just as we start to get to the fins, we've got that double. So you can see hopefully you can see the double nicely there. I'll just try and move it around a bit so you can. And then as we get off the back fins, we start going into a pretty aggressive V. And by the end of the tail, it's a very, very aggressive V. So yeah, all for turning power. And as you can see, you've got this, quite thin in the tail, and then the rail profile is probably dropped a bit, if anything, off the other ones. Hopefully you can see that, but you can see you know, the rail profile's just been pulled down in this area a little bit, so we're getting a little bit more of a win on the rail profile. And we go back to the rocker again. You can see it's getting towards a performance hybrid really. So yep, and then I've been running, you can come back a bit on your fins as well, which is quite good. Like my Puddle jump is quite big, so I'm almost running, my Puddle fish are on the split keels, the Puddle jumper I run fairly big quad set. On this you could come back towards either your standard or a larger version of your standard quad set. Last time I was out on it, I chucked some accelerators in the front in a large, which are quite a large template, and a Performer medium rear quad. And next time I've got some of the stretch, the new SF4s. I used to like the template of the old SF4, but it was never big enough for me, and the new one's quite a large fin, so I'm looking forward to trying that. I've not tried it as a thruster. I know some people were saying it doesn't work as good as a thruster. I suspect at this board at my size it probably will be fine. For some of the guys like Noel and the guys riding like 5.2s and stuff, it sounded like they preferred a quad, but don't see why it wouldn't work as a thruster. Probably also work as a 2+1 with your MRs and the trailer, or the power twins and the trailer. Yeah, I might get back with another ride review if I get some decent ways to test it in, which, yeah, maybe when we get a break over Christmas. It's been really very longboardy recently, unfortunately. So that's the Puddle Jumper HP. Hope you like the review. Cracking board. If you want something that's you know, like I say, if you had a longboard and you don't ride waves much overhead and you're fairly half decent surfer, you could probably get away with this as a, you know, semi one board quiver almost. So yeah, alright, sweet, cheers guys, see ya.